If I ask you to picture what a knowledgeable and successful coach looks like, what do you see? Maybe you're going to see someone with a confident voice and a glamorous appearance. Because to be honest, we see this all the time on the internet. The more established they are, the more professional pictures you see on their website. Sweat. So when I came across Bob Gentle and I really listened to what he says, I know he's different. So it gives me hope that if you're in the knowledge industry, ultimately it's what's inside that brings you success. So today I'm very excited to have Bob on the show to openly talk about how to build and monetize a personal brand. Are you ready?
Hey everyone, Kavan here. Back to our public show. Today I have Bob right in front of me. And yeah, say hi, Bob.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Any opportunity to chat with you, whether it's public or in private, is always welcome. One of the smartest people I know, and I really enjoy your content online. So it's nice to
Oh,
be here.
thank you so much. No, I got to know you because of your show. And and then I started to follow you on Instagram. So I keep seeing you here and there. I want to bring you on because you're definitely not the typical online marketer or online coaches that I see. I really like your style, especially your voice. And yeah, I just want to chat with you to learn more.
Well, it's very nice to hear. I think I've tried to be the typical online marketer and it just doesn't fit. And it's like, if you've ever been bowling and you wear those bowling shoes, it just feels wrong. For me,
Mm,
trying to be the Gary Vee or the Grant Cardone style of internet marketer, it just doesn't work for me at all.
Same here. Yeah, I don't know. I just like to do things my style, a bit more honest and genuine, and hope that some people would like it. So
Yeah.
I think that's why we click. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those listener who are here, let's get to know you a bit first. Like I don't like to jump into, talking about marketing, personal branding so much yet. I really want to learn more about you as a person. So can you like quickly tell us a bit about yourself?
So I live in Glasgow in Scotland, it's a reasonably new move for me. I moved from a much smaller city further north. There is a further north, which most people wouldn't imagine, right in the middle of the pandemic. And really for me, that was because my business had changed quite a lot. Things were possible for me, which weren't before. My business, and a lot of people will recognize this, was a very local business. I was running what was essentially a digital marketing and website design business. But I knew I wanted to do something different. So, and this is jumping the gun a little bit into, I guess, what you might want to talk about later on. I've been on a bit of a journey, and now my business is helping people in what you might call the expert space around the world to build, market, and monetize their expertise. And I love it.
Mm. Yeah, I want to tap into that later because I know you have been running this for 20 years and I really want to hear about the changes. It must be very different from even just maybe 3, 5 years ago, but we'll tap into that later.
Yeah.
What about how would your best friend describe you? Like what kind of adjective would they use?
I think my close friends, anybody that I spend meaningful time with socially, knows that I value honesty, but I also love adventure. And there is a very broad naughty streak. I have, I understand that rules and regulations are there for a reason, but for me, they're never cut and dried. There's always room for maneuver.
You mean in business or
I
in life
mean,
in
in
general?
everything in life in
Mm,
general, just because the world seems to show you that this is the way things should be done, doesn't mean there isn't a more creative or different way to do them. And that goes for anything. In terms of adventure, I love going out kayaking. I am a very passionate snowboarder. I love surfing when the weather's good enough. I'm not an idle person.
got it. I definitely agree with what you just said because I was just thinking about this the other day. Like there's so much content to learn about online businesses these days. But to me, the biggest learning is not really in those content or courses. It's really from talking to people like you, like as you described, fellow travelers, when you send me that message. And then we learned that, oh, actually there are a lot of behind the scenes that nobody knows.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. Yeah.
And I think this online business space as well, it should be an adventure. because
Mm.
we're all going out into new territory, meeting fellow travelers. It's the typical hero's journey. And something I'm quite sure you're finding, and I've certainly found, is that if you want your business to grow, you have to grow. And you grow through trials and tests and challenges and things being difficult until they're easy. And so for me, the business is as much an adventure as many of the other ridiculous things I've done in my life.
Yeah, especially we create a ton of content. So if you don't grow, your content will be stagnant. You'll talk about the same stuff over and over again and with no stories.
Well, absolutely.
So
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I want to ask you where you see this online business trend going, because I started 3 years ago, end of 2020. So that's when COVID has been almost a year. I got in because of, it's a long story. I won't get into it, but I definitely don't see enough of it. So right now I'm thinking, well, tons of people joined in the last few years, but then a lot left. So, but I still believe in education in general. I feel like everyone is learning, everyone wants to learn. So I see there's still potential. That's why I want to be in this area. What about you? I really want to hear, because probably you have more experience than I do.
Well, I made the pivot into the online space before the pandemic. And I can tell you,
Mm.
this isn't a pandemic phenomena. I think a lot of people looked at alternative ways of doing things in the pandemic, but I wouldn't say there are necessarily more or less people in the space. It's different people. I think the trend, like I said, I don't think it's a pandemic trend. I think it's a much longer trend than that. And it's the same trend as the internet. And I can remember buying AOL and CompuServe CDs on, they came, in order to get connected to the internet, you had to get a CD from a magazine in the supermarket. And even then, there were people. So when I got my first dog, it was probably 12 years ago. And I Googled how to train a border collie. And I found a woman online that would sell me a PDF on how to train a border collie. And I paid that woman $25. And I reflected when I read this, you know what? She just had one PDF and she's done find and replace and changed all the breed names. This is an amazing business. She was an online business 15, 20 years ago. So all we're seeing now is this becoming more mainstream because the internet is more mainstream. Connectivity is more ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So this is, for me, this is a natural migration into a connected space, away from the high street and onto the internet.
Mm. That's really profound. That, in a way, from what I hear is maybe online or offline is no longer a split. Like there's no
Really?
online businesses because, to be honest, everyone is trying to build a presence online. So maybe part of their business is always online, and then they have other stuff. Ah, okay. That gives me hope
I
to
mean,
to
maybe
continue on this path.
a useful perspective on this. I spent, like I said, 15, probably longer years before my online career as a local business, and I generated most of my business through word of mouth and referrals. What's interesting now is that that's not actually all that different, but the word of mouth and referrals are coming from people who've never met me. So people who do business with me, it tends to not be like $25 courses. They hire me as a consultant, as an advisor, or as a coach. So it tends to be slightly higher value transactions. My average customer value is probably in the order of $7,000.
Mm.
So I don't need a high volume of transaction, but what I do need is a lot of people to know who I am and kind of like me. And this is no different to how we used to do business. It's just done in a much bigger context online. And for me, it's much more efficient. Does that help see my perspective of it?
My question is, I don't know if you do everything online now, or you still have your offline components, but let's say everything online, like me, would the price point drop? Or do you think you can keep at the 7,000 price point? Because my perception about, doing things online is more volume, and generally
Mm.
price point is lower.
I think I'm not going to say this is a mistake a lot of people make, but a lot of people
Oh,
miss the opportunity. So when I say $7,000, that's the average lifetime because people tend to work with me longer term. So I'm saying 7,000 makes me sound really expensive, but that's not really the case. A good example of how
and
this
you're
works.
talking about website, right? It's a
No,
whole website project.
no. For me, that's more of coaching and advisory. So
Oh,
essentially
okay.
being a companion as somebody builds their so to maybe to clarify, most people who hire me, partly as strategic advisor, partly as coach, partly as technical support, because a lot of the things they need to do are difficult. And I help bridge all those gaps. So if you're an author and you want to know how can I monetize this book I've just written is doing quite well, well, I help with that. Whereas if you're an absolute genius and nobody knows about you, I'll help you fix that problem. And that tends to be sort of on a monthly retainer. That's what I do most of the time. A lot of people, when they go online, they do course or group program or things like that. But what
Yeah.
a lot of the time is more productive is to have a higher priced product on the shelf in order that those outliers that come along who see that, they want that. One of my mentors told me that there's always a guy who walks into a restaurant who's looking for the $1,000 burger. You don't want to be the restaurant that doesn't have that $1,000 burger on the menu. The interesting thing is, if you become known for that $1,000 burger, that's what people are going to come in for. So if you don't have an expensive product or maybe a high value product on the shelf, then those people are just going to walk right past. You won't even know they were in your restaurant. I don't know if
And
I'm
that's the
answering your question. I
goal.
think I went off at a weird angle.
No, but it I feel like I enjoy this chat because it's so real. I don't think it's talked enough. I agree on the high ticket. I also have a high ticket. So I guess what I want to say is, how did you get to offer that high ticket? Is it something that you know, you need to do it. So you would find a way, like services, right? You can offer a high touch service at first and charge a high ticket. So you can anchor your offering from day one, but you don't not have it. That's what you're saying, right?
How would I describe this? So I guess this will make more sense if I understand. So I didn't suddenly rock up one day and decide, okay, I'm going to sell coaching and consulting because I had a pre-existing business and I had to pivot that pre-existing business into something I was excited about because I was fed up with my business. It sucked.
Mm,
It sucked my
mm,
soul. It sucked my cash. I never made any money. I was fed up with it. I made a living, but it didn't do much beyond that. I was having coffee with my smartest client and he said, okay, you've built this website for me now, but what should I do with it? So I told him what I thought he should be doing. And he said, Bob, you're wasting your time. This is what you should be doing. So from that point onwards, I pivoted into online strategy. I started the podcast. I gained a bit of a reputation for as a guy who is a good strategic thinker and a very good tactical player. And through my podcast and personal visibility and regularly talking about these things, my audience, which was growing, gradually understood that's what you go to Bob for. Similarly, I grew my professional network. So something I know how to do is network because I depended on it. And something I learned very early on in business is that if you look after your network, they will look after you. So, big part of my marketing strategy is just being helpful to people and giving people what I do before they start paying for it. So, most of my clients began with people I just tried to help. It didn't cost them any money. And they said, how can we make this a regular thing? And that's how my clients tended to come about. So, it's been a very natural, organic migration. But if you tell a story often enough, people start to understand this is who you are and what you do. And if you build a large enough network of people who know that that's what you do, that network sustains you.
that's certainly the impression I have on you. Like since we
Okay.
met, like I just can feel that you're very helpful. We don't have a business transaction yet, but you're very willing to help anyway. So yeah, thank you for doing that. I want to go back to your painful.
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe before we do, in the spirit of build in public, this isn't
sure.
something I made up. There's a book called The Prosperous Coach. If you go read that book will tell you my current sales strategy. And it's a really good book. Buy it secondhand. Don't buy it new because it's fearsomely expensive. But for anybody that is in the coaching or consulting space, it is golden.
Amazing. I'm gonna check out that book right after this call. You mentioned the painful journey. So when I'm looking into your background and story across the 20 years, I wonder how you got into talking about expert business, personal branding. And I know you did digital agency before. So I guess we cannot cover the whole story, but what made you get to where you are right now?
I had the impulse that I wanted to do this probably for 5 or 6 years before I did it. And I think a lot of people listening will recognize this. You know what? I'd love to go online. I'd love to become a content creator. I'd love to build my business online, but you don't execute on it. And my first podcast mic I had for 5 years before I started a podcast. I just thought about it for a very long time. Never did it because I was scared. And I think a lot of people are scared of going online because there's the fear of judgment. But there was a moment of decision for me, which was my business. It made me a living just for a long time. I had quite a large team. They all got paid. But at the end of the year, I was always left with a giant tax bill I had to work out how to pay. And I read Mike Michalowicz's book, Profit First, and I got so angry. I got about 2 chapters in. I threw the book across the office and I had to go for a walk because I realized everything I'd been doing in my business was wrong. So I ended up deciding I'm going to make a big change in this business. I'm going to remove all of these parts of the business that are just making money to pay for the people to do the work it was a terrible cycle. And to cut a long story short, I probably in that year invested about £100,000 in that business just to lose it personally. I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. My family's better than this. And I could see there was part of the business that could do well, but I could also see people building businesses online and knew, okay, this gives me an opportunity to do something different. I can really lean into what people tell me they like about me because I'm fed up having clients that I don't really like and doing work that isn't really playing to my zone of genius. So I'm just going to suck it up. And I remember I was at a conference and I was telling people about my fear of personal visibility, which is kind of funny now, but I was nearly in tears at a table in a mastermind saying, you know what? I need to be visible in order for anything to happen, but it's just so difficult. And then I nearly punched myself in the face because what a lot of people don't know about me is I spent 15 years working in search and rescue, jumping out of helicopters into the sea in the middle of the night and abseiling down cliffs to rescue people. And it didn't bother me at all. And I thought, how do we train people to do scary things? And it's really simple. It's a gradual process of desensitization. So that was what I started doing, was just gradually desensitizing myself to the things that I found scary, really analyzing the things that were causing me anxiety. And here's the thing, fear shrinks in the light. And for me, a big issue was vanity. I was just scared of what people would think of me because of how it would make me feel. That was really the main reason I wasn't showing up online. So as soon as I understand that, it's really easy to move past. But at every stage, and this is why I say at the beginning, when you grow, your business grows. New level, new devil is a phrase I heard quite recently. And at every stage, as your business grows, as your personal brand grows, you experience this new threshold that you have to cross. So again, that's a very long answer to a short question. I don't even know if that was the question you asked. Sorry.
It's okay. We can let our minds and conversation wander a little bit. One thing I like about you, Bob, is very clear. It seems like what you help people with is and you don't overcrowd your information on your website. For example, I was looking at your website, the agency one, Amplify agency one, and it has a very clear structure. You show what you need to show, you hide what you need to hide. So for example, the thank you page would show me more. But then I got to the part where you have your roadmap, the free roadmap. And then I see a lot of steps, and a lot of, the gurus out there would say, oh, this is overwhelming. Like when people look at it, they would be like, oh, you can teach me so many steps. So what exactly are you focusing on? Why do you design it this way?
Well, the roadmap, for the listener, if you haven't seen it, it has 7 stages of building, marketing, and monetizing a personal brand. And when in each of these stages, there are probably about 7 waypoints, if I'm guessing. And these are all the various aspects of the journey. And I designed it primarily for me. I looked at, okay, after 200 podcast interviews, speaking to amazing people, let's extract what is it that is the common thread that leads to success? What do they all get right? And that was how the roadmap was developed. It was developed first of all for me to be able to orient around my own journey. And then honestly, that roadmap is a tool I use when I'm working with clients to help look for the next opportunities, but also to go back and fix some of the things they've probably not done. Because if you failed, for example, to operate from your zone of genius, which is step 1, but you have an amazing business, you're probably not going to enjoy it. You're probably not going to go as far as you could. If you have no authority, but an amazing product, then your sales are going to struggle. So it is complex, but that's because it's a tool that I use with my clients. And it's also for me a wonderful sales tool because if I get on a call with clients and I use this roadmap as a lens to help them understand their business, their trust in me and their confidence in that journey is really high. I often describe it, it's a little bit like if I wanted to go on holiday to Hong Kong, I have two options. I can buy a geographic map, which just shows me everything that has equal importance. Or I can buy a tourist guide, which is the journey designed just for me by somebody who understands the journey I want to go on. And that's a really good framework that's designed for you. I appreciate it is complex potentially for anybody who just downloads it. There is a lot of content to try and explain it. But for anybody who has the means and the motivation to hire a coach, they're probably going to say, you know what, that Bob looks like a guy who knows what he's doing. I'll hire him. So I don't mind that there's a lot to it because it works.
I think I get it. Okay, I'm going to share what I see. Maybe you can chime in as well. For example, when you're just starting out, you probably want to focus on a certain part, because if you present all these parts, you're going to overwhelm all these new people getting to know you. But you have been in the business, you have your network, you know what you're doing. So having this framework shows your expertise, but also I really like what you say about the lens, because when you get someone to look at it from this lens, they want to keep going with this lens. When you are starting out like fresh, starting out with one topic would be a better choice, but you are kind of like a veteran in my mind. So having so many steps is okay. But what people get wrong is they don't look at what stages they are on.
I think the key question for me when I set out to develop the roadmap, and I think this is the key question I think everybody should think about when they're first establishing their personal brand and what they want to deliver as value is, what's the transformation I want to serve? And then you move into what do I need in order to illustrate that transformation? So if that transformation is simply how do I help somebody start a podcast, then you can go deep into that one thing. For me, starting a podcast is one of the options on the roadmap, so I'm not going to go deep into it. It's just part of a broader ecosystem. Your transformation is helping people build in public. It's a very specific transformation. So you can go deep into that. You could probably build a 50-point roadmap just for that. So what's the transformation? And then all your communication, all your productization, all your content really focuses illustrating, narrating, giving confidence around your ability to be a companion through that transformation.
Wow. I feel like this is a masterclass. This is so good. Yeah. So much knowledge coming out from this conversation. I want to move into talking about audience, because I talk a lot about growing an audience. And a lot of times people would, we use audience and community kind of all the time. And when it comes to community, a lot of people would think that it's about building a paid community, like a membership.
Yeah.
But to me, I actually think building an audience, but having a very close relationship with them on Instagram, on Twitter, through emails, that is also a community. That's something that I see you do really well, because on like Instagram, people react to your posts. I see that. And these are not random people. I feel like they really buy into your philosophy and they want to reply to your posts. Sometimes they just want to cheer as well. So I guess everyone has a secret sauce to attract new audiences. For me, it's like side project marketing. I would build like kick-ass free product and I'll market a free product. So then people would come into my work that way. I want to learn from you, Bob. Like, what is your secret sauce to attract audience?
I kind of agree with you on the side products, and that's something that I've started to work on. So I have podcast guest management engine in Notion, and I have the ultimate marketer's toolkit I think that's also a Notion database. And largely, honestly, I'm seeing what you're doing there and I'm thinking that's really cool. I need to do some of that. But more importantly, I think step one of building a community is visibility. If you're not visible, then you pretty much don't exist. The first task as a brand is to occupy some space in the mind of the other person. So if you're not walking down the road and occasionally thinking about me, then I haven't really got a strong personal brand. So as personal brands, we need to show up with enough frequency that people can be exposed to us. Step two is we need to make people feel something, enthusiasm, potential. So our content needs to make people feel something. That's step two. And Every time we show up online, we are building neural pathways in the brain of the audience. Frequency, intensity, and power. Frequency, intensity, and clarity. If you're transmitting, these are the three qualities of a signal: frequency, strength, and clarity. So most people aren't really transmitting very clearly. Something you do really well, and a lot of personal brands do this really well, is they give people enough information to have a relationship in 3 dimensions. So you show family, you show what you're doing for fun, you share what you care about. And this allows you to exist in my mind as a more fully featured or fully formed image. So you own more neural pathways in my brain. And you see a lot of people do this online. I don't know if you've heard of this idea of the parasocial relationship. If you've ever met anybody really quite famous, where you know them, you're really into what they do, and they're standing right in front of you, and you don't know how to deal with it because you know how important they are to you. They have no idea. So you can't have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's just such a strange thing. This is something you can cultivate through regular visibility, giving people enough to feel that they have a genuine relationship with you. And then when they do engage with you online, that you are there for them. It doesn't take much. And I think what I would also ask other people to consider is size is not all that. I don't have big audiences on any platform really, maybe 6.5, 7,000 on Instagram, but that's not a massive audience. But that audience is enough to provide me a very good living. It's all about quality, not quantity. And I won't say it as mean. But sometimes big audiences are not all they appear to be.
When you said something about meeting like a really famous person and then you don't know what to say, I just want to go sidetrack a little bit. I mean, we're having fun here. When I was like 14 years old, I already started exploring the internet and I was hosting forums for a local singer, a female singer. I built the biggest fan forum for her and I ran it for a couple years before I moved to the US to study and I kind of left it, but someone else ran it. After like 10 years, we went into the same elevator and I told her, have you heard of my website? I didn't know what to, I kind of got so nervous. I don't know what to say, but I asked like, have you heard of my website? And she said, yes. That was, that was so cool. But my point here is we really don't know what to say because they don't know anything about us.
Yeah, it's a strange imbalance. And I don't bring this up to make people feel weird, but I bring this up to help people understand how the relationship an audience has with you can be extremely powerful and important to them, but you may never even know they're there. This is very common
Mm.
they're often very quiet people. They don't really shout about how important you are, but they are your biggest advocates online. They like every post. They may not comment, but they may be referring you. They may be recommending you. You never know what's happening in the mind of your audience.
So I totally agree with you. And I think your messaging across your content is so clear. But then how do a new stranger come into your world? I think you mentioned word of mouth referral. Is that your biggest channel? Like people just recommend you? Or do you use lead magnets as well? I just really want to know like which way you go.
I've had all kinds of things work. A really bizarre experience that I regularly have is from time to time, I think, you know what, I want to grow my group coaching program. So
Uh-huh.
I'll, I'll throw out a webinar and I'm trying to sell something at $80 a month. But what ends up happening is I might sell 1 or 2 people into my group program. But similarly, I'll probably sell more one-to-one consulting because people see, they meet me, but actually they don't want that. They want this thing that I wasn't even trying to sell. What was your question again? Because I had more.
Yeah, I was gonna dive into that. I guess you cover good points about like when people are around you, how you kind of develop your thought leadership and connect with them. I'm curious about how did they even get into your world? Because
Yeah.
for Instagram, it's really, or actually in general, it's really hard.
I honestly find LinkedIn's probably the most productive from a lead generation perspective. And what I often find is that my audience, they're never one platform specific. I don't really have anybody that's just an Instagram, but I'm often also connected with them on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. So there's no one platform drives anything. I guess what's different with me to a lot of people is I don't need a high volume of sales. I really only need maybe 1 or 2 new customers a month to be really happy. So I do have lead magnets. I do have an email list. I try to use it, not as well as you. I put out regular content on pretty much every platform. When I see somebody needs help or I can offer some advice, I offer it. But what's interesting is, and I also do outbound sales, to be honest. I also proactively engage people. So I don't wait for people to come knocking on my door sometimes. This is my big bugbear, especially when I'm working with clients, is people think that in the online marketing space, we just market hard enough and people will come and knock on our door and buy our stuff. And the analogy I have for that is marketing is a little bit like you're preparing the ground, you're sowing the crop, you're making sure that it's watered and the sun can reach it and you keep the pests off. Sales is about the harvest. And the mistake a lot of people make is they don't take the sales or the harvest as seriously as they did the marketing. And if people had a little bit more strategy around sales, and particularly active, proactive, outbound sales, I would say most people are leaving 70% of their opportunity unharvested. So one of the things I work with clients is developing what I would call a social selling strategy that allows them to be proactive, but in such a way that they feel they're leading with generosity rather than going out to hustle people. Opportunity comes through one of four doors: ads, content, relationships, and outbound sales. And a healthy business will have a strategy for each of those. I'm not a big fan of ads for smaller businesses like ours, but the other three, we can be in complete control of.
I only have two, so
I'll
in
share you my
trouble.
social selling strategy roadmap later. It's not
Yeah,
public
very
yet.
great. Wow. I'm lucky today. I agree with you. We have very different business model. Like I don't have a huge ticket, but when you said we don't sell enough, I reflected upon my own journey and I spent a lot of time writing newsletter, tweets, and I never give that opportunity for people to buy something from me. And this year, 2024, I'm trying to carry a new mindset because I do need to make this to work. And it's to just segment some lists and keep sharing what I can offer to them. I think, well, it's too early to say, but I think that's what is possible from my business model. Yeah.
A lot of people are very linear when they look at their opportunities to monetize their platforms. Yes, you have a great product range, but you also have a platform. That platform in itself is monetizable. But if you take the public show, for example, great vehicle for sponsorship. But sponsors, they don't come knocking on the door. But if you have two or three sponsors paying you $800 a month, that can have a big impact on your life. And it requires very little proactivity. And there's lots of other ways to monetize platforms that, if people were proactive, would have a massive impact on their lifestyle.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. I come across a lot of people, even myself, like we think it's always creating new products, try to sell it on social media. And then you keep repeating the same thing. And then after 2 years, you're like, what am I doing? I have all these products sitting around. So speaking of building products, I'm all about, involving the people around me, get their feedback, shape the product together. I'll even give the product off for free if they are my beta readers. I don't mind that. I'm curious to hear from you. Do you share your unfinished work? Do you involve people to shape your product? How do you do it?
Honestly, I've often struggled with this because for for a lot of my life, I could often be accused of not finishing things. And I guess psychologically that has impacted me. So when I look at Build in Public, Build in Public is great if you're a person who finishes things. And that's one of the things I really admire about you is everything you've done that I've seen is tied up with a nice, neat bow at the end. And the Build in Public works with that process. I love the idea. And I think for me, Build in Public, I take a slightly different angle on it, I guess. I was reflecting on this before we were speaking and thinking, well, how I've built my brand is very much a Build in Public exercise because it was a car crash at the beginning. I've made every mistake I could make along the way. I'm nobody's idea of an online alpha male, and I've had to find a way to make all of these things work for me. So in that sense, I guess I do Build in Public. I have a couple of book ideas. I think they probably lend themselves to Build in Public project. But it honestly is something I struggle with in the way that you do it, which I really admire.
What people don't know though, is that I involve people privately a lot. So I have a model that I teach my students, like build in private, contradicting, but earn in public. So the basic model is you cannot do everything in public. That's just nonsense. So I would talk to people privately, get their feedback, maybe in community groups or whatever, or even a feedback call. I learn a ton privately, but what's the earn in public is I take that action and I create a story and put it out in public So now it's a lot more interesting because it's fact based. It actually happened. I actually talked to Bob instead of people like making up some ideas or something. And I can continue to, ask a question in public or even give them a link to the wait list and say, hey, I'm working on this book. I talked to Bob. We had this idea. I'm going to change it based on his feedback. By the way, the wait list is here if you want to join. So build in private, earn in public. What about private? Like involving people in private?
I
Is
do
that
that a lot.
something you do or you want to do more?
I do. I have a great network, and
Hmm.
that's one of the real benefits that the podcast has brought me is I can call on really great experts in pretty much anything you can imagine. And so that they have been like an advisory council in my business, which has had a tremendous impact along the way. I think it's true. And this is an important thing, I guess, for people to understand. And you probably recognize this as well, that we see online business owners in isolation from the outside, and we think they must have done this all on their own. But what you probably recognize is that the online business community is extremely supportive of each other. And I often use the analogy of it's a little bit like Harry Potter, where you have the magical world and the mundane world. And the wizards all know each other. They all recognize each other because they do the work. And I found that to be extremely supportive. So if I have a product idea, I'll often test it. Certainly my social selling framework, that's all been tested with some people I really respect. And they've all said there's nothing like it. It's awesome, which makes me really excited to continue investing on that as a product that will probably become a build in public product.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. Do you reach out, I guess, similar to outbound sales? You just tap their shoulder and show them, ask their feedback.
I do, yes. What I learned early in business is that most people are really happy to help somebody.
Yes.
And what goes around comes around. Successful people know that they didn't get successful on their own. So they're generally very happy to help other people if they see them doing the work. There's lots of people who ask for help, but what they really want is a handout. If people can see that you are making the effort and that you're earning the opportunity to ask for help, then they're very happy to. And I think are a brilliant example of this. Nobody's going to look at you and think, this guy's just looking for a freebie. No, this guy's earned his place in the community. I'm happy to help him.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Try my best. I feel like sharing in public, it paints people a picture, right? They can see that you're committed, you're serious. So even though you might be new in the journey, they're going to look at you different. So that's why I like to do in public as much as possible.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob, why don't we move into the second part of this conversation? So in public show, right? Part two is we dig out something that you want to talk about, and then we just chat about it even more. And I thought, so you send me 2 points, right? I think the second one about like scalable product, that's quite interesting. So I'm thinking about that as well, kind of diversifying my portfolio. So what are you thinking about that?
Well, what I do find is that, and I have a few ideas. One is I get pitched every day by podcast guesting agencies. And I am thinking there's probably a better way to run a podcast guesting agency because I know how podcasts work. I know how podcast guesting agencies work. And I reckon I could do it better. And it's largely a business that I could give somebody else to operate.
Mm.
The other side of it is the social selling side of things. If I look at where do most people struggle, it's not with marketing, but it's with actually turning that marketing into value for themselves. So I have a framework around social selling that I could probably productize. I'm not really sure how I would productize it yet. Whether it be high touch or low touch. What's interesting is, for example, you asked me about the roadmap. There are lots of waypoints on the roadmap. I wouldn't want to necessarily be known as the guy for any of those one points on the roadmap, which is why I've avoided niching into them, because I want to be the guy who is the companion on the journey. But if there was one thing I would be happy to be known for, it would be the guy who can help you sell online in a way that you control and you're not depending on the internet weather as most people do for their sales. So
Mm.
that's probably one area that I will productize.
Wow. You're sharing these ideas. I hope these are going to be public. I hope you're okay with that.
I'm fine with it. Honestly, most of the work is done in
Yeah.
terms of the product. It's just that, if anybody thinks this is a good idea, go knock yourself out because you've got to be able to do it.
I love it. It's not about the idea, right? It's about the execution.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm thinking about the same because I feel like this expert business we're in, we're teaching, sharing, and that takes up our active time. If it's not us teaching, the business doesn't really stand on itself. So I'm thinking about, I came from a software background, used to run SaaS company, never successful, but I do sort of know how it works. So it'll be good for me to partner up with someone. I don't code anymore, very lousy, but partner up with someone to build something that is for the same audience, ideally, because I don't think I can run two businesses serving two audiences.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm just not that type of person. So yeah, right now I'm digging into pain points around people around me to see what I can do. But the whole concept is the same, to extract out us from the equation.
I like that idea. And I do hanker after a sales business, but like you, it needs to be something that's already aligned with the personal brand because you don't want to confuse your audience. And if you look at it, what is it that you have that is of value at the moment? It is your visibility, it's your brand. That gives you instant route to market, but only for the right product.
And
The
we want to
pet
take
industry would
advantage of the spillover, right? Sometimes they can still be your coaching clients. They can use your tool. They can use your new podcasting guest agency. That would be the best of the world. Yeah.
yeah.
But how do you extract time to work on these new projects? I try my best, but honestly, I don't know. I have so much on my plate. So I haven't figured out how to work on a new project like that. How do you do it?
Straight away, you have a young family. So you have, I'm not going to call it a disadvantage, but I definitely have an advantage in that my kids have both left
Oh,
home. I do find that in my work with clients, there's a big distinction between those things that they have to do because they seem to be on fire and those things that will move their business forward. And most people will prioritize the seemingly urgent over the actually important. A lot of tasks on your to-do list, if you ignore them for long enough, will go away. So there's that. For me, I guess I'm a big time blocker. So if I have a project, I know I want to get it done. If it gets blocked, it gets done. But I think most people's businesses, if they understand where they want to get to. So for me, I wanted to move away from what you would call done for you work, which used to take all my time. Now I have almost no done for you work left. So when I'm on a call with a client, I'm on. And when I'm off a call, I'm off. Unless I volunteer to do something for them, which I do far too often. So I guess there's this process of gradually adjusting what you're currently offering in order to make more time. I think also as people's brands grow, as their own value to their audience grows, your ability to, I guess, do what I've done to an extent, which is move away from services to advisory. So it's a difficult thing to explain, I guess, but I'm kind of puzzled why you're so busy because when I look at your business from the outside, it looks very, I'm not going to say simple from as a negative, but the superficially, it looks like there aren't that many moving parts and it's highly productized and your time is very well leveraged. I don't know.
Well call out. I just posted on Twitter, finally reached six figure for my business, but it took 3 years and 82% product sales, 8% coaching. So no services. I'm someone who is like, I think I over engineer the product. Like, for example, like if I make a course, I need the fancy background. I need to edit everything myself. I need to do the slides. Everything's perfect. Over engineer. People
Well,
don't need
there
that.
is also a world where, and I see this a lot, people build a product, they launch that product. That product is now launched. I need to launch a new product. But what about just doing the same product but better? What about building in recurring revenue? I was speaking to somebody yesterday who's selling, I think, $60,000, $70,000 worth of product every month, and they have no recurring revenue built in. Like, why are you doing this? It makes no sense. You have to kill yourself every month. Fair enough for a lot of money. Just imagine a world where you didn't have to sell all this every month. You have to sell a tenth of this, and you're still making the same money.
The difficult part is I've seen someone on Twitter, for example, doing really well selling one-off product. I feel like maybe when you're in it, when you're making 50K a month, just charging people you wouldn't think about the next step yet because you want to kind of maximize that. When it starts to drop to 30, 20, 10, then you would think about recurring,
Yeah.
but no one has that, forward thinking. No one can basically, or maybe just a small number can.
Well, for him, it's a case of, well, what happens if part of the sales machine fails? Because he was
Yeah.
depending on an external sales team. and suddenly they weren't performing. So the whole business was collapsing. Whereas if you've built your entire business on recurring revenue, you're not really affected by the weather or the economy or anything like that. One of the things I knew right from the beginning of when I started my pivot was I wanted recurring revenue. I wanted 80% of my revenue to be recurring. And I was inspired by a book called The Automatic Customer because they did studies where they found it is no difficult to sell a recurring payment than it is to sell once. So why would you sell anything once? It doesn't make any sense. There's no more effort required to sell a subscription than a one-off payment. And there's another phenomena, which is called, it's a psychological phenomena called the fallacy of loss, where people will, once they've got something, they don't want to lose it. So once somebody has a subscription like a Netflix or something like that, even if they don't watch it, they're not going to get rid of it because they might use it. And while I wouldn't advocate for that as a business tactic, as a commercial sustainability tactic, it's really quite.
That's true. Lots to think about. Yeah. And thank you for pointing out that I'm very busy. Something for me to think about. But yeah, thank you, Bob. I want to wrap up the episode here. Thank you so much for your time. But where can people find more about you?
You can find me on every social media platform, just at Bob Gentle. Some of them I execute better than others. And you can find my podcast, The Personal Brand Business Show. Again, just search Bob Gentle in all good podcast players. And if you do want the Personal Brand Business Roadmap, then just go to amplifyme.agency.
Final thing. I think you're so gentle because your last name is Gentle. Personal branding. Yes.
It's not a made up name either. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bob. I'll see you around.